Good afternoon and welcome to our third WARF Entrepreneurons COVID edition. We are delighted to be with you today and thank you so much for being flexible as we adjusted the timing of this session. My name is Laura Heisler and I'm the Director of Programming for the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, or WARF. And along with the UW-Madison Discovery to Product, or D2P office, we bring you this series throughout the academic year. We focus on topics that are important to the entrepreneurial community, including and surrounding UW-Madison. This session marks our final installment before the fall and continues our recent focus on issues stemming from the impact of the current pandemic on key technologies and industries important to the university and the state. I'm particularly excited about today's session. Our panel and moderator collectively represent some of the greatest expertise in the nation on food supply chain, running from farm to consumer. Before I turn the platform over to our moderator, I just want to mention a couple of procedural details. We'll be hearing from each of our speakers and moderator, one after the other, and a little bit of back and forth between them. And then we'll be opening up the Zoom for your questions. But you can ask questions at any time through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Just mouse over the bottom, you'll see the Q&A box and you can type your question. You can also like other people's questions to move them up in the queue. We will not be using the chat function during today's session. With that, it is my great pleasure to turn the mic over to fabulous farm babe, Pam Jahnke, Farm Director for the Midwest Farm Report. Take it away, Pam.
All right, thank you, Laura. I appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us. I think you're going to find the dialogue between our panelists and obviously your questions really stimulating at a time when I think we felt more frustration than anything over COVID-19. This is particularly focused in on production agriculture and the food distribution chain and what we've been learning since COVID-19 upended all of our worlds. Now, we've got a distinguished group of panelists. I'll tell you just quickly, we've got Angela James. She is our Deputy Secretary from the Wisconsin Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection, online with us. Tera Johnson, she is a founder and director of the Food Finance Institute. John Lucey is the director of the Wisconsin Center for Dairy Research on the UW-Madison campus. Dr. Paul Mitchell is the director of the Renk Agribusiness Institute, also on campus. We've got Chris Salm, who's the founder of Salm Partners and CEO of ABE Discovery in the Middleton area. Brandon Scholz, president and CEO of the Wisconsin Grocers Association, along with myself, to hopefully keep you entertained and informed over the next hour or so. And again, please remember your questions are welcome. We'll do our best to make sure that we're addressing them as we move forward. So let's start off with where we were before COVID-19 actually impacted and imploded many of our worlds. I want to turn it over to Dr. Paul Mitchell from the Renk Agribusiness Institute. Paul, there's a couple points that people need to use as reference when they think about Wisconsin agriculture, the farm families that they have seen on news and television over the past couple of months, and the impact COVID-19's had on their world. Give us a baseline to start this conversation with. Where was Wisconsin agriculture economically before COVID-19? And what was our food distribution network looking like before it became a part of our everyday shopping?
All right. Is everything working here? The sound and the video, I hope? What I'm going to begin with here is starting with the farm, the beginning of the whole sort of the food chain, if you will. I'm going to start with dairy because we're the dairy state. And what you see here is prices at the monthly level going way back to 2011, all the way up till May here of 2020. And what you see is there's been a long period here from about 2015 to 2019 where prices are pretty relatively low, below $18. And then it started to creep up. And then you see the big catastrophic fall that happened just as COVID really hit in. We saw all the images of people dumping milk and all the big concern as the whole supply chain was disrupted. And the point I want to make here is we've had several years of what farmers would consider low prices. This area right in here it's too low to make money for most farmers. The cost of production is probably above $18, probably closer to $19, $20, $21, $22. It all varies depending on the farm specifics, but I remember last fall, we took my class to visit a dairy farm late in October, and the farmer was saying this is the first time in years, he said, I was making money. It felt really good. Then 2020 started and things were looking great. Prices were going well, and then COVID hit. So that's milk, dairy, and it's had a big effect on our dairy herds here in the state. This data is from DATCP, and it shows the annual percentage decrease in the number of dairy herds in the state by month. So for several years in a row here, it's been about 4%, meaning each year Wisconsin has about 4% fewer dairies. It doesn't matter what month it is. Then as those low prices really started to kick in here about 2017, you started seeing in the middle of the year, the rate of attrition, the dairy herds exiting the industry began to increase. And it went up, and then by 2018 in yellow there, already it was up to 6%. By the end of 18, it was already up to 8% almost. And then in last year, in 2019, it got to its peak of about 10% for several months in a row there at the end of 2019. And it's only here at the beginning of 2020, just as those prices were beginning to come up, that rate of decline decreased. It's still much higher than average. 4% has been our typical. This implies about a herd a day leaving the state. Each day we lose on average about 30 a month. And that's coming down, slowing down some, but it's still well above our typical average. Isn't just dairy. This is from Iowa because they have really good data. It goes way back several years, but it shows the margin farmers in Iowa were making. The price after you take the price of corn minus the cost of production, take the price of soybeans minus the cost of production. And these numbers are going to be similar for Wisconsin. The numbers vary a little bit, but corn and soybeans. The U.S. is the world's largest producer of corn and soybeans. We grow about a third of the world's crops for each of those. And yet our farmers, for several years, 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, farmers were losing money when they were growing corn. Soybeans, pretty much the same story. The last little few years, corn has been looking good, but then just as the year, again, the 2019 crop is what farmers are selling right now, the prices are falling apart. 2020 looks like another low year. And so again, several years of below break-even prices for farmers in the corn and soybean, dairy. I could go through several other industries in the state. Cranberries have been really suffering the last several years. We have a large processing vegetable industry, the same thing there. Potatoes is doing all right, but again, a lot of these industries have been struggling. And it's had impacts. These are the farm bankruptcy filings. Chapter 12 is official title. They're registered with the federal court system. And it shows the data for Wisconsin ended as of March 31st. This is for that whole year that ended in March 31st of this year. Wisconsin had 77 during that calendar year, March 31st back to April 1st of 2019, well above every other state in the country. I looked at these numbers at the beginning of the year at the Ag Outlook Forum, and it was about 47. Is what we still, again, way above average, and we've added 30 more in the last 3 months. This isn't even all farmers. Some farmers don't qualify. They're too large for Chapter 12 filing, and some are decide to choose to file under different chapters just for various reasons. But it quickly shows Wisconsin has been losing a lot of farmers to bankruptcy. For every one of these bankrupt farmers, there's several more who exit the industry, as you saw in the previous, the dairy herd information. Really what's been happening here is federal support is what's been keeping farmers in business. These are the numbers that show the billions of dollars given to farmers over the last 12, 13 years here, back to 2010. And you can see it's been about $10, $12 billion a year on average. Then the last couple of years, it's really skyrocketed there. 2019, that big brown one was the market facilitation program. That was started with the trade disruptions, with the trade wars that the administration became involved in, and it had a major effect on us. And the compensation was several $1 billion going to farmers. And you can see in 2020, it's already up to $15 billion. This does not include the program called CFAP, the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, that's in the process. Farmers are signing up for it now. The expectation is roughly $16 billion. Lots of farms also applied for the Paycheck Protection Program funding, which can also be turned into a grant, just like a lot of other small businesses. So I expect that 2020 forecast to go even higher than the 2019. Federal support is what has been keeping farmers in business these last few years. Quickly, just some headlines I've gotten from a presentation I did over the last couple of years, and just added some recent ones. It's not just at farms. This is broadly speaking across the whole food supply chain. These are headlines I just grabbed from various online business and economic, more of what you call popular press. CEOs are exiting in the Fortune magazine from 2017. CNN Business talks about trouble in big food. Financial Times talks about food industry giants are struggling to keep up with changing tastes. You saw the last from the Wall Street Journal. Food companies can't figure out what Americans want to eat. From 2019 here, the Food Industry Executive has a nice little report. Why food companies are struggling to keep up with consumer trends and some more. this has been a broad problem in the food industry. Everybody's been trying to sort this out. We haven't even talked about the input supply industry, the people that farmers are buying their inputs from. They've been struggling because farmers have been cutting their costs in these dark times for them. And then it goes right down the supply chain. The whole supply chain has been struggling with low rates of return. And so it's been a major issue. COVID has just exacerbated some of these problems. And so I would argue we are in a crisis. COVID isn't just the only source of it. It's been a long-standing problem. I just picked some images here to kind of get a sense of what do people do in a crisis. You can see, hit the panic button. You can play the blame game, pointing fingers at everybody. You can abandon ship and flee. You can stick your head in the sand, start grasping for straws and various snake oil solutions, curl up in a ball, play defense, circle the wagons. Sort of the English way of keep calm and carry on, like Sisyphus there at the bottom, rolling his rock up the hill, and of course, Chicken Little and the sky is falling, the sky is falling. The last part I'm reminded of is the Chinese word for crisis. There's a story that's not true, but it'd be nice if it were, we can pretend. Crisis, the symbols for crisis are the symbol for danger and opportunity put together. Like I said, it's not true, but it's sort of become a story that we tell ourselves, particularly here in the West. And I think that's where we're in now. It's a crisis, and there's danger, but there's also opportunity. And this is this black swan event, the coronavirus, the COVID-19. It's kind of put us between a rock and a hard place, and but there's an opportunity here. And I'm going to let some of the others talk about some of these opportunities and move us forward from here.
Thanks, Paul, for giving us that benchmark where we can kind of all come together and understand where we were before COVID and where we are today. Now, one fella on the panel has really been living this in a real-time way. Chris Salm is the founder of Salm Partners. He is also the CEO of ABE Discovery out of Middleton. Him and I have had fascinating conversation on how he has watched this happen in real time and had to innovate and respond quickly. Chris, can you take just a couple minutes and maybe brief people in case they're not familiar with Salm Partners? Give us a little background on how you really literally were right in the eye of the storm when it came to COVID-19 reaction, response, and innovation. Share, would you please?
Sure. Thanks, Pam, and thanks, Worf, for facilitating these conversations. I appreciate being a part of it and look forward to learning from the other panelists as well. So first, Pam, a bit of background on me, because we are all a product of our parents and our environment as we've grown up, and that really dictates how we respond to life. So my father was born in 1918. That is a year that everybody knows today as a great flu epidemic. His family lost a 3-year-old girl and a 5-year-old girl to that flu. Those family losses influenced his life, and through that influenced my life. He went on from that to get polio, a dramatic influence on his life, which has influenced my life. My mother grew up on a dairy farm in Minnesota and lost her mother as a teenager. My mother was a teenager. Her mother passed away from cancer early in life, and that influenced her life, and it influenced my life. My mother went on to become a registered nurse and dedicated her life to raising a family of 12 kids. I grew up on a dairy farm, learned a lot, but every time that we were faced with struggles, we doubled down and worked harder. We doubled down and thought more deeply about what was going on and figured out innovative ways to fix them. The meat industry, COVID-19, kind of synonymous, walking down the path together. Everybody understands the challenges in the meat industry. Through yesterday, more than 25,000 employees in meat plants across more than 250 plants in the country, COVID positive. More than 25,000 employees in the meat industry. Those COVID positive employees and the dealing with COVID in the workforce has significantly disrupted animal agriculture across the country, from the farm through processing to what's available in the marketplace. The shutdown of the whole of the food service industry has influenced the farm through processing into the marketplace. So COVID-19, a very, very influential pandemic. Of course it is. So what have we learned? We've learned that it's contagious. The speed of the contagion is rapid. We understand that. We've learned how to react. The reaction has been around shutting down plants, disrupting the flow of agricultural supplies through the system, right? The reaction has been changing infrastructure to better allow for social distancing and worker separation. The reaction has been implementing CDC recommendations, OSHA recommendations, EEOC recommendations, Department of Health Services recommendations, reactions. But we've also learned that we have to get in front of this virus, the SARS-CoV-2 virus. At Salm Partners, a company that is based on new technology, we have done something that no one else in the industry has done to date, and we believe can be a model for how you manage through this crisis. In early April, we were part of the Brown County Daily Press, meat industry and COVID cases. At that point, we said we have to identify coronavirus carriers. In order to identify coronavirus carriers, we implemented a surveillance testing protocol. Within 4 weeks, we mandatorily tested every single one of our employees 3 times. The first cycle of testing turned up about 10% of our workforce as a COVID carrier. 10%. Of that 10%, the vast majority asymptomatic. The second cycle, repeated within 10 days of the first cycle, we turned up 9% of our workforce. Every single one of them asymptomatic. The third cycle, conducted within another 10 days of the second cycle, we turned up less than 0.5% of our workforce as positives. It took 3 cycles to get in front of the virus. The fourth cycle was conducted within 3 weeks. 1 positive out of a workforce of more than 500. It took sample, 4 cycles of sampling to get in front of the virus. And at this point, we will be sampling 100% of our workforce at least once a month, and we'll let the data dictate how frequently we do that. But the industry as a whole is sampling, but not utilizing it with that aggressive nature for surveillance purposes. The CDC recommends screening, health screening. Health screening will turn up less than 5% of your COVID carriers. You have to sample. And the technology and protocol for sampling exists today. Now it's expensive. It costs us roughly $1 per worker hour to sample. The technology is advancing and advancing quickly for sampling. Within the next 2 to 3 months, we'll be composite sampling for surveillance purposes, dropping the cost from $125 a person to less than $50 a person. And our goal is to get it to be less than $20 a person. And with that kind of protocol, you can stay ahead of the virus. The meat industry is sampling, but not maybe as frequently as we need to be sampling. We've implemented all of the surveillance. We've implemented all of the social distancing. And I don't know if John is going to talk about this or not, but if you drive across the state of Wisconsin, you will see the very, very most effective protocol for eliminating contagious disease going from one animal to another. An invention, an innovation that happened in the state of Wisconsin, the calf hut. The calf hut took contagious diseases in dairy calves down to next to nothing, took death loss from double digits to the low single digits. Now for humanity, we can't live in calf huts, but we can isolate known carriers, and through that isolating known carriers, control the contagious nature of this disease and get ahead of it.
All right. Yep. Chris, I appreciate the story, but because of time, that has turned into a commercial success for you, what you just explained. We're talking about opportunities in COVID, and I think you're finding that. Can you just fast forward to what you're doing with your experience today across a wider geography and across other companies, perhaps?
So from that, we established a business called Covigilance. You can go on to www.covigilancesolutions.com to see that. But we offer the service of facilitating sampling of 100% of your workforce in any location, anywhere in the United States. And we do that through a self-sampling system and a courier service that couriers samples to the lab. And we analyze those samples and get the results back within 48 to 72 hours. That we have done for a number of companies across the state of Wisconsin and across the country in the meat industry. We've been from Virginia to Iowa to Minnesota to Pennsylvania to New York to, so.
Yep. And that's what we want to focus in on. Hopefully we get a chance to come back around and talk a little bit more about that. Remember, folks, your questions are welcome. We have got a lot of panelists on here that have tremendous knowledge that they want to share with you, but we are limited on time. But the point is, the trials and tribulations that agriculture and the food industry are witnessing may also be some of your greatest opportunity for entrepreneurs. And I want to talk to one that lived it, been there, done that. And that's Tera Johnson. She's along with us. Tera, I love your story because you've been down this path. When Tera and I talked before this panel, she said probably one of the hardest things for her is she'll sit and listen to all these folks, get all kinds of ideas and want to take a run at it again. Tera, take us down your path in Tera's way. What do we need to know if we're getting all jazzed up and excited about these opportunities? Help us tap the brakes and get kind of a list of things we better think about as well when it comes to good ideas and really making them financially viable.
Sure, thank you. Well, it is so great to be on this panel with amazing people in an industry of agriculture and food that I care deeply about and have been in it for a long time. And for me, when Pam and I talked, I told her that this is like deja vu all over again, because when I started Tera's Way, we literally finished our raise and then the economy fell apart. So I'm remembering as the economy is falling apart with COVID, like, oh yeah, I was there. I had, letters of intent to purchase and to supply my plant, and 100% of the people who said they were going to buy for me didn't, because the economy fell apart, and half the people said they would supply didn't. And so, you're an entrepreneur and you pivot, and that's what entrepreneurs do, which I love hearing Chris's story, right? Because it's like, yes, that's what we do. We're entrepreneurs, we see opportunities. So, so we pivoted and grew in the middle of the recession. And I think one of the things that, that I wanted to highlight for people is because we're in an economic crisis that's caused by a particular virus this time, it doesn't mean that doesn't create opportunity for people. So for those of you who don't know, Tera's Way is a brand of whey protein, and it was designed to be a health and wellness product for the health and wellness consumer. And so it's an example of a value-added, innovative product in the dairy industry, and it's the kind of product that consumers do want, right? So it's not that, you know, all the data that we saw earlier, it's not that consumers are changing, and it's hard for the food industry to change. And the innovation that comes in from entrepreneurs that's where a lot of change happens. And that's not true. That's not just true for food. It's true for lots of industries, right? The disruption comes from the innovation that you see in entrepreneurial people and companies. So when we, Tera's Whey grew up to be the largest brand of whey protein in the natural category. That was in 2018. So it's been really successful. When we started the company, or when we sold the company, I decided that I really wanted to help other people be entrepreneurs. So that's why I started the Food Finance Institute, and specifically about money, because you can't get very far as an entrepreneur without money. And so I focus on finance and money in companies. You're going to be hearing from CDR later, who's an amazing resource for entrepreneurs too in the state, in dairy in particular. But what we do and what I do when I'm working with people is Pam, your thing about, there's lots of people can have ideas. What does it take to actually you know, turn it into a company or a successful company? And there's so many things about that. But what we do is really focus on getting a business model that can actually make money. So this is like an analogy would be, we were looking at data before about how farms have been losing money. They have a business model that isn't profitable given the external environment, right? And in entrepreneurial companies, you can't lose money for that long because usually the government isn't jumping in. Now with COVID, that's not true. We've had programs like PPP and EIDL that have been super helpful for the innovative young companies that I work with these days, and farms, by the way. So they got to get a business model. We work with them on getting that defined. And then critically, you got to be realistic about the money side of it and how much money it's going to take to start it, how much time it's going to take, so how much funding you need and where you go and get it. And so we spend a lot of time working with both. We do work with farms too, mostly value-added, high value-added farms, and also food companies, and help them do that. Yeah.
So the opportunity was there. You've got to steel your nerves, so to speak, in this kind of economic climate, but it's still there. We may get a chance to come back to you, Tera. I appreciate the question, or the story of resilience and making it a success ultimately in the end. Now, how you do that, though, can be critical. Having good advisors in your corner and making zero mistakes in this erratic world can be really challenging. John, I want to bring in the Center for Dairy Research. Now, by virtue of my job, I know a lot about what you folks do and the tools that you make available to others. But maybe you can share a little bit more on just exactly what the Center for Dairy Research has available and the thought process that people might want to go through when it comes to how they develop products, how they reach out to participants, how they think about the technical side. You know, how many times have I shook the hand of a farmer that had a great idea about a dairy-related product that he was sure he could make on the farm until it came to packaging, until it came to sanitation, until it came to marketing. That's your wheelhouse, John. Take it away.
Thanks, Pam. Yes, there's a lot of challenges, a lot of opportunities. A little bit about CDR before we get into it. CDR has been on the Madison campus since the mid-1980s, and we have about 40 staff, and we work with lots of programs on campus and off campus. And one of the things we really focus on is trying to hire people back from industry and kind of merge them with the resources of academics as well. So the world-class university we have. So trying to be a place where people come back from industry with ideas or challenges or insights and marriage that with what we see on campus as well. And these people come from both the ag sector, the dairy sector, and other kind of sectors. We are unique in that we're primarily funded by farmers through the checkoff program or through industry. And really, we are focused constantly every day talking about how to help industry, and whether that's a small farmer to start a business in the dairy side, or whether it's one of our co-ops here, helping them create new products or specialty cheese or other kind of things. And we work with over 400 companies a year in all sorts of product development, just like Tera was giving the example of it, whether it's a product development or whether it's a troubleshooting or training or other kind of activities. That's what we spend every day doing, and we'll continue to do it. And I think back to the theme of today, you know, I think the CDR is a place you go to get the tools and to get the expertise. Once you have an idea and once you have some fire in the belly that you want to do something, we will have that in both the training that you might need to do that, or in the assistance to make a product, or also in recent years we focused a lot on entrepreneurship support as well, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. See if I can go on. One of the things, talk about turning on a dime. I mean, our industry had to almost immediately change, because in late March, you basically had shut down, not just here in Wisconsin, but rippling all across the US. And it really affected food service in a big way. When you think about restaurants and so on, schools, institutions, etc. What that meant for our industry here in Wisconsin was that somewhere in the region of about 50% of our cheese that we make was going into the food service sector in one way or another. So immediately you had that sector really been disrupted, and the concern immediately back to the plants is, what do I do and why am I making cheese if I don't have a consumer and don't have a market? And we were dealing with these companies on a daily basis. You saw the knock-on effect here in Wisconsin and across the US, where farmers were then told by plants, we don't need your milk. We don't know where we're going to sell the products. We don't have markets for it. We don't know when they'll be coming back, and farmers started to dump milk. So from our side of things, what we started to do is actually very strange and interesting as an academic and a university person as well. We had actually been focusing for a number of years on technologies to extend the shelf life of cheese, because we wanted to gear up and export more cheese to the world. Wisconsin obviously is a big cheese producing state, the biggest in the US, but we only export about 5% of all the cheese we make here in the US. And we were looking at a range of new technologies that will allow us to get somewhere between 3 months to maybe up to a year extended of the shelf life. What we did is we turned around and said, well, now we're in a crisis. We need to extend the shelf life of the cheeses we're making right now so that we can find some new consumers, that we can wait out this terrible crisis that's going on, or maybe we need to turn these products into being export opportunities. So it's amazing that we had never intended to be for a COVID pandemic, but it was for export, but we were able to turn that research and say, we can apply that to help you in the plants. We did that with a webinar in early April, and we had over 500 companies turn up to this webinar, and we put out fact sheets and information sheets, and we ended up working with over 50 companies on strategies for what they can do in terms of extending that shelf life. And I think we also work with USDA, as we talked earlier on, and Paul mentioned, the federal government has brought forward the various programs for supporting farmers directly, but also for purchasing dairy products. But the challenge there for the USDA was they can't purchase something if they don't have a spec to say what is the stuff that they're buying and how should they grade it and how should they buy it. So we ended up actually training the USDA on what they should be saying and specifying before they could make any purchases on new types of cheeses. So that was an interesting aspect as well of turning over what we do. And of course, a focus of today is talking about entrepreneurs, and we have a turbo program which is supporting entrepreneurs, and we actually put together a lot of relevant, timely information from them, because obviously there was a lot of different financial programs available to them because of the crisis, and they were looking for a lot of assistance on where to do and where to get information and how to respond. And actually that website has been running hot with all sorts of people going there for advice. So I think strange things happen when you're in a crisis. Isn't it? One of the things I want to talk about going forward as something that's new and something that I'm very excited about is this Dairy Business Innovation Initiative. It was something that Senator Baldwin had got into the last Farm Bill. And what it did is it allowed for the formation of 3 national centers that would focus on dairy business innovation. And that really means both farm businesses getting into dairy product, they're diversifying into those territories, or for farmstead artisans are growing value-added dairy, and we've talked about that in some of the speakers already. CDR was named as one of those 3 national centers in partnership with the Wisconsin Cheesemakers Associations. But I can tell you that we had over 40 different letters from groups, companies, and associations in support of this application. And our initiative is to cover the upper Midwest, when you look at some of the states like Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, etc. And it is started, and actually that grant program to farmers and to small businesses is open right now. And you can go to the CDR website, and there's a turbo section which has all of the information about how to access those grants. And it really is trying to focus on, new marketing, new products, new expansion, any kind of value-added new opportunity. You can apply for a grant. The total amount this year that we got that available this year is about $220,000, but we just this past week submitted a brand new additional funding request for over $6 million for this program. So that will add over $3 million available in grants to businesses if we are awarded that later this year. So I'm very excited about this new initiative, really, to partner between what we typically do more with the manufacturing side of our business and support them through the CDR efforts, but we're reaching all the ways back to the farmers who really want to diversify their products. And that's a very exciting thing for us to be able to do that.
That's excellent. Very good. Thank you, John. We appreciate it. That's going to have to do it for right now because we want to keep moving on with the rest of the panel. And remember, these resources are available to you regardless of if the speaker's talking, folks. And I do want to encourage the questions to continue. Our panelists are trying to answer as best they can if they're not on screen. So please feel free to send us your questions. Okay, so some of you have had questions about the food bank interaction with the food industry. I want to make sure that we give Angela James, our new Deputy Secretary at the Wisconsin Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection, a little opportunity to take you behind the curtain, so to speak. DATCP mobilized very quickly, not only helping the state's farmers, but also helping to coordinate efforts between dairy farmers of Wisconsin, different checkoff related groups, Wisconsin pork producers, our Wisconsin cheesemakers, and those food banks. Angela, DATCP is there to try to help in whatever way they can. And sometimes it may be grants, like John pointed out. It may just be logistics of keeping inspectors rolling and things like that.
Yeah, thanks, Pam. I'd say that that's probably the biggest lesson learned during COVID for the state agency. I mean, we don't always bring the sizzle, all these folks have really good stories, but DATCP sits at the center of this sort of food system here in Wisconsin, from the Consumer Protection Unit within DATCP that's responsible for enforcing price gouging and working on issues related to egg producer security, which reimburses farmers if a processor goes bankrupt, to our food safety division. We have one of the largest, for example, we have the largest meat inspection program in the country to do state meat inspections, all the way to our egg development division that does marketing and product development assistance for folks. So I think if you want to try to come up with what that means in terms of what we offer to entrepreneurs, it's that we can be a resource. We understand the regulatory environment you need to enter, and we have that ability to help connect the dots on those logistics to at least identify the players that you need to work with. I think we learned very early during the crisis that was one of the most important things we could do. We could connect people. So starting in very early, I think our call started the first week of April. We started doing hours and hours of calls, bringing together people like Brandon from the Grocers and others within the industry to talk about what they were experiencing with food supply and delivery. And we learned a lot by bringing in all aspects of that supply chain, where previously we had only really focused on where we regulated or the people who came to us for innovation and help. We pulled in everybody to start talking about what they were seeing with this incredible disruption, and it created a lot of opportunities to help address emerging issues and maybe get ahead of a few. And we're going to try to carry those with us forward as we try to take a step back and ask ourselves, what can we do with Wisconsin's food system to make us more resilient, to offer opportunities for entrepreneurs and our existing businesses to profit and outcompete other other industries here in Wisconsin. I think it's important, and Professor Mitchell didn't drop what we drop all the time. It's a $105 billion industry in Wisconsin, and the UW puts out an impact report that about 1 in 9 Wisconsinites who have jobs work in something affiliated with agriculture. So this is an enormous part of our state's economic health, and we at DATCP try to sit in the center. So I ask people, reach out to us as a resource, and we intend going forward to continue to convene people to have these conversations. To answer the food bank issue, thanks, Pam. We did, there was a lot of stranded material, and we worked with a lot of the producer groups, like we had the Passion for Pork program with the pork producers. We had various partnerships with the Hunger Task Force in Milwaukee. Rural Mutual Insurance stepped in, and the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin stepped in, and we tried to match make. If people had product that they wanted to donate before it expired, we helped them try to reach the food banks. Now, with the money that Governor Evers was given by the federal government, we're creating a grant program to help assist those food banks with adaptation and innovation so the food banks can deliver. They, as you can imagine, given the economic stresses out there, the food banks are experiencing almost unprecedented demands. And it's challenging to receive all this food, process all this food, store all this food safely. And we're going to have a grant program to help them increase their capacity to do that. And we hope to use some of those funds to buy Wisconsin products so that farmers and processors can be reimbursed for the food they create, move it through the food insecure system.
Very good. Very good. Yeah. We talk like things are done. They're not done yet. That's part of the reason why this is such an intriguing conference. So let's talk a little bit about the chaos that it was creating real time on the front lines. So the one common denominator out of all these panels that I think any of our viewers are able to identify with is the grocery store. You may look different when you walk in today with that mask, whatever you're doing, but most people have continued to shop one way or the other, and that's why I want to bring in Brandon Scholz, who I know could educate us all on how quickly the grocery industry was forced to pivot, and not just by their own making, but by government and county regulations as well. Brandon, the emphasis is on opportunity. So I'd like you to take a look, maybe tell us what had to happen fast for your grocers, what challenges they saw immediately, and maybe what we're learning on the opportunity side of things. Could you please?
I'd be happy to, Pam, because there's been nothing like it ever. There's nothing that compares to this in any part of the grocery world's industry, as well as working with our partners and stakeholders in the supply chain. So what did the grocers have to do? This came on like a tsunami. I mean, mid-March, all of a sudden, bam, the word was out. We had a pandemic and people started to stockpile and hoard. That caught the industry off guard because we weren't prepared to replenish those shelves beyond our normal purchasing and inventory. So that's when you saw the impact of toilet paper and rice and cleaning products, all those things that people deemed really important at that time that they cleaned off the shelves. It took a while to recover both at retail as well as from our suppliers. At the same time, because there's not just you do one and they do the other. At the same time, while grocers were more than capable of sanitizing and cleaning their stores, they had to up their game beyond any expectations. Now sanitizing every cart, every rail, every doorknob, every handle in the freezer section for their customers. They had to safeguard their employees. And that took a while to understand what they had to do, because at first it was kind of gloves and maybe that would be okay, until they started to learn the impact of people breathing and sneezing and the spores coming out. So you saw in rapid succession, changes happen quickly. I remember one day I got a call from a guy who said, I'm the only guy in the Midwest that could supply plexiglass to your stores for sneeze guards. Well, guess what? There were about 100 of them. And within a course of a couple of days, every store had sneeze guards up. And it wasn't just grocery, it was your hardware store and any kind of retail business. So each day, each week, they had to figure out what they needed to do while at the same time trying to run a business. So the pressure then went on to create social distancing. You started to see the decals on the floor. You started to see every other lane checked down. Anything they could do to help in the physical distancing issue. They also had to deal with their products. The government shut down salad bars, hot bars, water dispensers, soda machines, coffee grinders, anything that had a button on it was gone. in a lot of cases, there was questions as to what you could do with deli, and some kept deli, some shut their deli. Everybody went to wrapping produce. Meat cases were shut down and pre-wrapped and put in the store. So all this is going on this week, and then the next week, and the next week, and the next week, all the while trying to make sure that their customers could come into the store, have a safe shopping experience, get their stuff and get out. That was the next thing. Teaching customers to get in the store, have a list, shop smart, and leave. Don't bring your kids. So we had to force customers to change their patterns. Customers had to learn on their own to change their patterns. If they had product loyalty, when they're used to buying a certain kind of chicken or name your favorite soup, if it wasn't there, they had to buy something else and they had to move along. So that has changed part of the merchandise and the market. I know somebody had a slide over there that says, the soup companies don't know quite what to do. They ramped up production in early March to meet the demand and still could not meet demand. What you're finding from a lot of the manufacturers is that if they're putting 30 SKUs in the store, they've decided they're going to put their top 8 in the store, and the other 22 are they'll sell out, and then they'll get back to them. So we've seen a change from our suppliers in terms of what they're giving us for our customers. But all along, it's been a function of what can you do to maintain some sort of safe shopping, give your customers confidence, because they have to shop. Now, what we've seen over the weeks is that, and I hate to go in the point of saying things have settled down a little bit. I think maybe it's because grocers have adapted and now understand their customers a little bit. They're working with their suppliers to understand what's coming in, but we've still got a lot of things coming. One of the biggest changes that we saw was online ordering and online shopping, where depending on the market, depending on the store, you saw their business around 2, 3, 4, maybe 5% of their business was online. From mid-March until end of April, probably into May, that jumped almost 350% to the point where you saw, grocers having unbelievable sales. It used to be that you could kind of go in the morning, order what you wanted to pick up at 4 o'clock, and it would be there. Now you've got to wait. You had to wait to get in. You had 3 or 4 days before you could get the product delivered, picked up. That settled down a little bit now. But what the opportunity is created here is that ramp up that quick was going to take maybe 3, 4, 5 years as online ordering was going to double kind of every year. Now that it went so high, it's going to settle back down. It's still going to be beyond what the expectations were. So now they have to have a suitable platform to be able to do online sales. They have to ramp up their delivery. They also have to ramp up their online pickup. And so for that much business, you can't do it as we did it back in February. Now you've got to build a little mini distribution center inside the store, and you have to be able to accommodate the size of those orders. So this is an ongoing thing. You're going to see all the safety precautions put in place, right, likely to last into next year. There's no talk of settling it down.
Let me jump in here, Brandon, because we've got a question, and I know you and I talked about this before the conference. I did not realize the connection that grocery stores have to food pantries, food banks, and daycares. That's the other thing that really, you and I had talk about a grocery store having to have a big heart because we're going where we've never gone before. Explain that quickly if you can.
Well, they've always had a big heart for food pantries and food banks. It's been one of, it's been a dedication of the industry to help their local partners, whether it's your local food pantry or some of the bigger food banks, not only from the retail suppliers, but from our wholesale suppliers and manufacturers. So everybody participates, but we also recognize that this was a time when you had to up the game. And so while you're trying to keep your shelves stocked and, have product there for customers, you're conscious of what you can do for the food pantry and the food banks. It also presented other challenges. So you saw stores dedicate hours for older shoppers to come in at a certain time, so that worked. One of the ones that we worked to deal with was with daycare centers across the state, and there's thousands of them who have strong nutritional needs, requirements that they have to put in place. And when they go shopping for their kids and their families, it's difficult when we're at 60% or depending on what the product is. They need cleaning supplies for their facilities. And if we can't get, products, even substitutions, it's tough. When we went through the whole thing of the transition from when our dairy farmers lost their school and institutional restaurant business, grocers eventually picked up 15% of that, maybe a little bit more, but it took in a transition a while for the supply to get that extra product in, as well as putting it into packaging that is suited for retail as opposed to the others. So, you saw some limit 1 gallon per customer. Well, that doesn't work for a daycare center that's got 30 kids. Right. So we're working to try and help them accommodate and have better relationships with grocers. So the grocer understands what their needs are, when their the peak times are, and stuff like that. So these are all things that there's never a no in there. It's just what can we do to figure out what we don't know, how to make this work. So all those challenges came, and they're going to keep coming.
Right. The other thing that Brandon didn't get a chance to visit with, and you'll have to follow up with him because we're running tight on time, is that through the Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection, Brandon reached out to the meat industry as well. They're local butchers that have been taxed, as Chris kind of started with, they went from zero to being buried in the red trying to process animals. Brandon has been working with his independent grocery stores in Wisconsin to try to make sure that they are aware of each other so that their grocery stores, when they're having a tough time finding pork or getting chicken or whatever, there's a local supply there. And I appreciate Brandon and Angela for working together on those kinds of things.
We'll just say DATCP had a great idea when the meat industry collapsed and they couldn't process. All those local meat processors, they put together the database that we sent out to retailers. I just saw a report yesterday that said they are booked up solid through the end of this month and booking into July. So great success story. It's a good part of the business, great partnerships to have. Credit to DATCP on that one.
But again, and I'm an old dog in this business, and you just kind of say to yourself, duh, why didn't we think about it before? But that's what COVID has done in a lot of regards to our food industry. I recognize the clock. If you've got questions, please get them to us as soon as possible, and I'll trust Laura and some of our WARF friends to make sure that they're answering some of the logistical ones regarding this recording and this broadcast. I want to go back to the two people that I kind of started with. They are the ones that been there, done that, and may have some sage inspiration, I hope, for any entrepreneurs that are trying to get a hold of the opportunity that COVID has presented to us. We can go all day long about the disruption, but where do you see the vision for the future? Tera, I want to start with you because, again, as I said, you entered the market as an entrepreneur at a time when everything fell away from you, from financing to processors to partnerships. So what inspiration or what motivation can you give those entrepreneurs that are online with us now to keep carrying them forward?
Yeah, so the first thing I will say is keep at it. It's the thing about being an entrepreneur. Like, we are the people who see rocks in the middle of the river and we get our kayak right up next to it and shoot around it. Like, we just figure out a way to move forward. And a lot of that is just, failing fast forward, that idea you talk about in entrepreneurship. I mean, I went through hell and it all worked out, right? It worked out great, but it was hellish. The other thing I'll say, and I see this in lots of the people I work with, before COVID, if you were in the food business or farming, having a strategy for online was sort of like a nice thing to do when you had time to do it. That's not true anymore. Like, you've got to be able to figure this out. Like the grocery stores are doing, all the brands have to do that now. And even farmers. I mean, some of the farms I'm working with are the direct marketing consumer. Their business is up like 500% right now. But they too had to get their act together about how to get online and how to take orders and how to ship stuff, and there's things to figure out, right? Yeah.
Well, and hopefully some of the people that are on this video call can help you with some of those things to figure out. That's what it's all about, and I appreciate that, Tera. I'm going to just quickly interject my personal opinion as a farm broadcaster that's grown up and been in this state my entire career, my life, and it's always been connected to agriculture. People have never been more aware than ever before of where their food comes from, who is producing their food, how it gets to them or doesn't get to them. They are so engaged with Wisconsin agriculture, the individual farms, the labels, the brands, and how they get that food. I think it is a sweet spot, if you will, out of a very dark spot, that black swan that Dr. Mitchell pointed out. as we wrap it up, I want to go back to Chris Salm, who began his comments by going back in his family history. It's a terrible phrase, but if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. Chris, as an entrepreneur, where do you see the opportunity? How do you continue to inspire your team and other entrepreneurs you come in contact with?
Well, fabulous, Pam. We have to have a fundamental belief that the greatest age in the history of mankind lies yet before us. So I told you a bit about my father, right? He passed on some wisdom to us as kids. Early on, he bought and sold horses to make a living for the family. And he would always say, if there's a pile of horse manure, there's got to be a pony in it somewhere. So find the pony. And in this COVID-19 situation, here are a few thoughts about the pony. I don't know about you, but in this cold and flu season, I have not had a single cold nor the flu. We've been avoiding the coronavirus, but we've also been avoiding the cold virus and the flu virus and all the bugs that go with it. There has never been in the history of mankind so many people with so many resources focused on developing a single solution for the control of a virus, the SARS-CoV-2 virus. There will be solutions. In fact, yesterday there was an announcement that a company in China has a vaccine going to the Chinese military to be implemented on humans. A vaccine against and that is phenomenal speed. There are 150 various vaccine platforms being developed today. Until that vaccine shows up, utilize the resources to identify and isolate, make sure that you're healthy, make sure that the people around you are healthy. But the investment in technology and the ability to get to technical solutions is just phenomenal. UW-Madison, right in the heart of it. University of Wisconsin Systems, right in the heart of it. Wisconsin Agriculture, right in the heart of it. I've never been more optimistic.
I love it. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that so much. I appreciate all of our panelists. Honestly, if you can't tell by the tempo that we've tried to keep up here, just scratching the surface on any of the experts that we've had on this webinar and what they have to bring to the table as far as enthusiasm, direction, life references, and of course, laboratories and skill sets that are available to everyone in the general public is what it's been all about. I have found it fascinating myself. And again, at a time when I think many people are woe is me, wringing their hands and wondering what's next, this group in particular exemplifies where you can find that silver lining when it comes to the dark cloud of COVID. My name is Pam Jahnke. I'm going to turn it back over to Laura. Thank you so much, panelists, for allowing me to moderate this exhilarating conversation. I hope that all of our panelists will follow through, or our guests will follow through with the panelists, and I appreciate WARF organizing such a great group. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you so much, everybody. What a fantastic, uplifting, inspiring conversation. Thanks to the panelists. Thanks especially to Pam for your thorough extraction of all this knowledge from this group in such a short amount of time. I just want to point out to the audience, thank you, of course, for joining us. We will be sharing this video at warf.org in the next day or so. So if you want to catch it again or send it to folks, you can find it at warf.org. And we will be back in touch with you as we get closer to the fall with a full lineup of fall discussions that promise to be at least as inspiring and energizing as this one. So thanks so much to all of you. Everyone, please be well and happy 4th. Thanks so much, everybody.